Hi everybody, welcome again to our Creating an Idea Bank mini course. Today we're going to look at the next step of the process. We're going to look at examples. Now, examples are very, very, very important. And they're not so easy to think about in terms of an idea bank, but I'm going to show you how to prepare some of these and try to make them as flexible as possible. And I'll explain what that means in a second. So the first thing you want to keep in mind is that the examples are a crucial component of the essay. Examiners are looking for these specifically. Don't forget that the task says provide your own examples from your own life or experience. Now, not always going to be possible to provide examples from your own life. You probably don't have all that much experience with housing, for example. So you're going to have to make some of these up along the way. And I'll talk about that in a second as well. The most important thing not to do is to rely on one standard or template example. And I've seen a lot of students do this, like people who send me their essays. They use the same example with slight variations for basically every essay they write. The university of whatever found that, and then whatever. They use the exact same example, but it doesn't always work. And it doesn't always apply to the argument that they had just made. So be very careful about using templates. You have to think of an example for the situation you're talking about or you're writing about. Make sure the example is a natural extension of the argument. If you're going to put, for example, I want to make sure that this explains to me exactly or shows me exactly what you just said before. And if you're showing how something works, make sure you're using the right word. Make sure you know the difference between for example, for instance, to illustrate, to demonstrate, etc. These are very important things to keep in mind as well. Now, different teachers will tell you different things about this, but in my opinion, your examples don't have to be real. They don't have to be true. They just have to sound like they're true. In other words, the examiners are not going to go fact check you. They're not going to go find out if this university actually did this study. But they're going to also understand if you're using a template. They're going to understand if you're forcing an example into your essay. You have to make it sound true. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now, actually. There are different types of examples you can use. You can use scientific or factual examples. Basically, what people related to this topic might offer, or what they might have to say about this particular topic. So again, if we're thinking about housing, we're thinking about realtors, lawyers, housing ministers, etc. Specifically in this field, talking specifically about this topic. So here's an example. Even condominium prices have become too expensive for most young families. So we're talking about buying versus renting, etc. And you're saying even condominiums have become too expensive. To illustrate the point that they're too expensive, the Realtors Association of Canada, I don't even know if this exists, but I'm guessing it does anyway, has recently published a report. So an association is not going to do a study. They're going to file a report. Right away, if you say study, the examiner is thinking that maybe you're making it up. Associations don't make studies. They file reports stating that despite more units being built, fewer are available for sale as more developers choose to rent them out. So fewer are available means the price is going up. So this supports the argument that I just made before that it's too expensive. And it's a bit of a scientific or factual example. Okay, so now there are other types. You can give a personal example. Now, they ask for personal examples whenever possible. These are going to be the easiest for you to come up with because they're from your life, they're from your real life. If you can think of a personal example that applies to this topic, use it by all means. But make sure it's very supportive of the argument or the idea you just presented before. You can use concrete or real world examples. These are real situations in real life that actually relate to the topic, or concrete yet general examples. They don't have to be a real place or a real person, but they have to be a real situation that might happen in real life. So examples. So for example, my uncle, so it's personal, it's a relation to me, recently sold his home for 7 times what he paid for it just 10 years ago. If you're talking about rising house prices. Even in Tokyo, a real place, a real city with a real situation talking about tent cities. The phenomenon of tent cities has been growing in recent years and attracting even those who can afford apartments. So you're talking about homelessness maybe, and some people are choosing to live in a tent rather than an apartment, but you're using a real place and a real situation to support your argument. And the last one, in fact, people are increasingly choosing to renovate their houses rather than upgrade to newer or bigger ones. So people are not buying houses, they're fixing the ones they have. So which people? General people. It's a very general idea, but a real situation as opposed to an imaginary one that might not be possible. Okay? So these are 3 more. Also, make sure you collect yourself some facts to have ready to be used. So for example, if you're talking about housing, average rents, think about like the top 5 cities in the world and how much people are paying rent there. Cost of living, what are the most expensive cities in the world? Population shifts, where are people leaving, where are they going to? Most expensive cities in the world, that's cost of living related. The numbers of homelessness, so for example, in California, the number of homeless people is going up and up and up. Again, depending on the topic you're using, you might just be able to throw in some actual facts that you have stored in your brain because you've created an idea bank for it. When I talk about terms, think about specific topics that you can use. Cost of living is a fixed term that it involves how much it costs to basically pay rent, eat, clothing, if you have to have the internet at home, pay your bills. All of these things together amount to cost of living. So when you're talking about rising prices, this is part of it. Rural flight. This is basically the term that explains how more and more people are leaving the countryside. They're leaving the farms, they're leaving the small towns and villages and moving into the cities. This is called rural flight. A smart home. More and more people are building their houses with computers basically built into the house. What are the advantages and disadvantages of technology in the house? Well, you talk about the smart home as an example. Ideally, what you want to do is make your examples transferable. You want to think of examples that could be used to discuss different subtopics within a general topic, or even unrelated topics, like in a different category altogether. So for example, I mentioned before tent city. A tent city is basically a small community of people living in tents. Some of them are homeless, they have no choice, they can't afford to pay rent or to buy a house. Some people do it because they're just tired of the system, they don't want to be under government control, they want to be off the grid, etc. Now, you can use the example of tent city to discuss homelessness, government responsibility, subsidized housing, like the government helping pay for rent and these costs. Questions about cost of living, demographic shifts. We talked about rural flight a minute ago. Immigration, social change, economics, environment, all kinds of different things. If you're thinking about environment, it might be a little confusing. A lot of people are moving into tents because they don't want to contribute, I should say, to climate change by having a house that's using electricity and using water and using concrete, because concrete is a serious polluter, etc. All kinds of different things you can use this sample with, okay? Collect your samples, try to apply them to as many different topics and questions as you can, and the more you have, the more ready you are to support your arguments and thesis, okay? Almost done. There's only one more to do, and that's your sample essays, which we're going to look at in the next video. See you then.